Hello, everyone. We're here this morning with Josh Prince. Now, Josh is an individual we have worked with for a number of years now. Josh is an attorney, and Josh's specialty is Second Amendment issues. Good morning, Josh.
Good morning, Doug. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for joining us today. I appreciate that. And we've got a lot to unpack, my friend. There's a lot going on in your world. I know you're a new daddy, too. So that's a whole new aspect on life for you, isn't it?
It is 7-week-old as of yesterday. And we've been very blessed because Aaliyah Jade likes to sleep. So she does sleep usually at night for 7 hours at a time. And I think we've got too accustomed to that because unfortunately she has a little bit of a bug or something right now, so she has not been the past 2 nights. So
oh my.
Sleep deprivation is great.
Yes, you get a little taste of kind of what we went through. Our first had colic, so we didn't know what sleep was at that point. It's a blessing that you have a 7-hour sleeper. That's great. So what I'd like to do this morning, Josh, is just pick your brain a little bit for our viewers and get an idea of where we are with things right now. I think it's important for people, and as you know, our second core value for STN is the Constitution. And it's important that people understand the Constitution, read it, and recognize what our freedoms and rights come from. But the Second Amendment is extremely important to us simply because it's the way that we can guard against overthrowing or totalitarianism that has been really core in the reason our founders included the Second Amendment in the Constitution. If we look at the Second Amendment, it's very short and very simple. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I mean, it's pretty straightforward in my mind, but there have been many interpretations and many detractors, those who kind of come across with this concept, and I don't know where that comes from, that the Second Amendment is all about hunting rights and hunting. You can probably give us a pretty good history on the legislative assaults against the Second Amendment and some of the things that have occurred over the years at the Supreme Court level relative to our right in the Second Amendment.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I think it's interesting that most people forget where we came from and the fact that we took up arms against the English because of their monarchical rule over us, and that was something that was well known to our founders, that we needed the ability to keep and bear arms to hold the government in check. But that has been lost on many people who believe that, the Second Amendment was written strictly for hunting purposes. While clearly the Second Amendment applies to the ability to hunt, that was not the primary focus of it. And in fact, even the U.S. Supreme Court has acknowledged at the core of the Second Amendment is the ability to defend oneself. And that came from D.C. v. Heller a number of years back, I believe back in actually 2008. And we've seen some more recent precedent from the U.S. Supreme Court, especially in Bruin versus New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, where the court acknowledged that this was a right that is one that is not provided by the government. No right can actually, under our Constitution, be provided by the government. It's an inalienable right. In fact, here in Pennsylvania, we call it an inviolate right, meaning that the government cannot in any form or manner challenge it. And I wish the courts would address Article 1, Section 25 of the Pennsylvania Constitution at all. I've argued it a number of times. It basically says that all the rights enumerated in Article 1 are accepted out of the power of government and are deemed inviolate. And that is an extremely strong statement by the founders of this Commonwealth as to what is understood to be those rights enumerated in Article 1, which includes our own Second Amendment right. That's in Article 1, Section 21, where it says basically the right to keep and bear arms shall not be questioned. And many have argued, and I agree with, that that statement may even be stronger than the Second Amendment saying shall not be infringed. And yet, unfortunately, our Pennsylvania Supreme Court has interpreted it to be an equal to that under the Second Amendment. So there are some, disputes over those types of issues. But in regards to the current legislation and litigation that's affecting us, there are so many issues, and it blows my mind that we are now in a time where the government can violate, whether it be constitutional rights or statutory rights, and there's no holding the government accountable for that. And why I mention that is here in Pennsylvania, we have a state preemption statute that says that local municipalities cannot regulate in any manner firearms, ammunition, and firearm components. And yet what we see time and time again is local municipalities acknowledging that that exists and yet still going and enacting provisions that violate that. There can't be any better of an example than the city of Pittsburgh that a number of years back, I think it was in 2019, had enacted 3 different ordinances regulating everything from what they called high-capacity magazines to assault weapons, and also providing for extreme risk protection orders, which is also interesting because there's no ability for a local municipality to create a cause of action for the courts to address. But nevertheless, all of those were issued after the city council members each individually went out and spoke to reporters and saying, yeah, we know that we're generally prevented from doing this, but we're going to do it anyway. I was counsel for Firearm Owners Against Crime in challenging all 3 of those ordinances successfully. That went up to the Commonwealth Court, which is our one level of appellate court. The Commonwealth Court affirmed that, yes, all these ordinances are violative of our preemption statute. The city of Pittsburgh appealed up to the PA Supreme Court. And unfortunately, it's been before the PA Supreme Court now for somewhere around 3 years, I want to say. There's been 2 stays. Initially, the court stayed it based on a decision in Crawford versus the Commonwealth, and Crawford involved a challenge by, you can pretty much guess it, the city of Philadelphia, contending that our preemption statute was unconstitutional. And so after that happens, the court denies it, says no, there's no validity to this challenge. There was another challenge, this time by Gun Owners of America versus the city of Philadelphia, in what is reference to an ordinance regulating what they called ghost guns, basically things that are not yet firearms that could be completed in the firearms. And anyone who knows anything would tell you that you can go into a Lowe's and with $50 purchase the items to manufacture a firearm from Lowe's. You don't need anything special. But anyway, the GOA case was lost before the Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas, goes up before the Commonwealth Court, and unfortunately they lost there too. And then they appealed up to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court decided to take that case immediately after the decision in Crawford. And the reason I believe that they decided to take that case is in Crawford, we had submitted an amicus brief saying beyond the statutory preemption that exists in Section 6120, and that's in our crimes code, 18 PA-CS Section 6120, there is also something called field preemption, meaning that the Commonwealth has regulated firearms so broadly that it intends to be the only entity that regulates firearms here in Pennsylvania. And really, in the decision in Crawford, the court basically agreed with us, set everything up, and then came one step short of saying, yes, we have field preemption, because it really wasn't an issue in Crawford, given their disposition of the matter. So I believe that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has taken up the GOA case because it intends to come down and say that, yes, beyond the statutory preemption provision we have in 6120, we also have field preemption. And unless the Commonwealth, meaning the General Assembly, gives a local municipality power to regulate firearms, you just can't do it. We recently had a case in Montgomery County where basically Lower Merion Township, who I will say is a frequent flyer for violating our preemption statute, decided to regulate where federal firearms licensees, so your gun dealers, can actually locate. So they did it by a conditional use provision, as well as having all sorts of obligations on the potential business. And so we had challenged that. We got, I think there were 13 different regulations imposed on those beyond the conditional use criteria. And we got the supermajority of those knocked out at common pleas, but there were 3 of them that the Court of Common Pleas thought were still lawful. We took an appeal up to the Commonwealth Court. And several weeks ago, we got the decision from the Commonwealth Court that, yes, all 13 or how many ever there were all preempted and unlawful, and directing the Court of Common Pleas to basically institute an injunction in relation to those provisions that were not already enjoined. But again, the problem is with these types of issues, it's the taxpayers, it's you and I that end up paying for this. The city council members, township members, supervisors, whatever the case may be, never end up spending anything out of pocket. Even their attorneys, which in the municipal context are referred to as solicitors, are paid for by our tax dollars. And so this is really disconcerting. There is a bill pending to basically allow for attorney's fees and costs in a situation, because beyond us, the taxpayers, having to pay for the defense of these actions, even if you're successful in litigating these cases, and I have been across the board successful in every one of these cases that I've brought, you don't have any right to attorney's fees or costs. So it would be great to see the General Assembly and the governor enact a provision that at least allows for attorney's fees. But at the end of the day, we all have to be cognizant that even the award of attorney's fees is going to, in essence, go against us taxpayers. And so there really needs to be even more reform, I'll say, in the sense that those members of, whether it be a borough, a township, any form of local government, county, where it is found that they violate our preemption statute, that they have to individually be responsible for the debt incurred. The other frustration is Pennsylvania law does make a violation of our preemption statute a criminal offense. It's actually a misdemeanor of the first degree per section 6119. But unfortunately, district attorneys won't prosecute it. So you have the stick available to prevent it. But even, for example, in relation to the Pittsburgh case, we had reached out to the district attorney and said, look, you have them acknowledging to the media that they know they're violating this provision, prosecute them, and wouldn't. So we really do need to change that mentality, because, you know, neither you nor I, if we violated the law, get a pass at it. They would be immediately filing charges and prosecuting us. But somehow, some way, if you're some form of government official, you're apparently immune. You can just violate the law, knowingly violate the law. And, you know, we can probably spend a couple hours talking about all the ways individuals in today's society can unknowingly violate the law. There are so many laws. It is an impossibility to know all the laws that apply to you on a daily basis, let alone those, you know, more nuanced laws that apply, you know, annually or something even less than. So it's really a concern of mine. But I know I kind of went off a tangent on the statutory preemption, but there's a lot of other litigation we're involved in. We have cases where the Pennsylvania State Police Commissioner is contending 18 to 20-year-olds don't have Second Amendment rights. We had brought that case during the COVID lockdowns because individuals during those lockdowns were subjected to our state of emergency provision. And probably very few individuals in this Commonwealth are aware that if you don't have a license to carry and a state of emergency is declared either locally or at the state level, you're virtually precluded from being able to take a firearm out of your home in any capacity. And so we had sued because those 18 to 20-year-olds aren't eligible for a license to carry. You have to be 21 to get a license to carry firearms. And I will tell all your viewers, if I can give you one piece of advice, if you are eligible for your license to carry, please go out and get it. I don't care if you never want to conceal carry a firearm on your person or have a loaded handgun in your car or other mode of transportation. It is the best insurance you can get because it accepts you out of so many of our laws here in the Commonwealth. So just a pro tip for anyone listening. But beyond that, we're dealing with so many different issues at the state and federal level, and it's just mind-boggling the types of issues we have. I mean, another case against the Pennsylvania State Police Commissioner, there is something called Act 235, which is involves bodyguards and anyone who basically wants to be able to carry a firearm for purposes of security or other means. And the Pennsylvania State Police decided that they were just going to have an internal policy, not published anywhere, that if you had a previous conviction for simple assault, you would be ineligible. Now, they have regulations that they've enacted defining what is prohibited conduct, and simple assault isn't specified in it. Yet they are denying people, and then better yet, it says in the application that if you're denied, you are forever foreclosed from the Pennsylvania State Police considering a future application. So we had sued over that. The Commonwealth Court agreed with us that there was no basis for the Pennsylvania State Police to make this contention, had issued a preliminary injunction. That was about 3 years ago. And now the Commonwealth, we basically sat on the decision because, we have an injunction in place and my client was able to get certified and all that. But now the Commonwealth Court is basically saying, hey, this case has been pending here for all these years. We kind of want a final disposition. So we've moved forward in that regard and expect a decision in the hopefully near future. Although, being honest with everyone, the time frame for decisions is becoming absolutely insane. Quite honestly, before the Commonwealth Court, at a minimum, you have to expect a year and a half from the date that you appeal. I had a case that from when we actually had filed all of our briefing, it was over 2 years. And briefing usually takes somewhere around between getting the case filed, getting the court to issue an order directing briefing, and continuances that generally are filed by the opposing party. It takes 6 months on average to get through just briefing. So that was a case where we had over 2.5 years just waiting before the Commonwealth Court. And then if you appeal up to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, guess what? It'll be usually somewhere around a year before they decide whether they want to hear it, because most cases they have discretion of whether they want to hear them. And if they do, you're easily between briefing, oral argument, and then getting a decision 2 more years. So, I have cases that have been pending since 2015. We're now 10 years. And one of them, the city of Harrisburg, that has violated our state preemption statute, going back to that. It's actually up on appeal for the second time. And so, your listeners really need to know that although justice is supposed to be there for everyone, the time frame is becoming absolutely insane. And unfortunately, it's because of the litigious nature. It's because of the fact that, government no longer believes it is subjected to the laws it enacts. So there's a lot of these challenges that become necessary. And it just is extremely disconcerting that we see justice delayed for so long. I have a case in the federal court, the Third Circuit, that has been pending since 2016, and is up now to the second time before the Third Circuit. And there have been so many delays. The individual had a DUI that resulted in misdemeanor of the first degree, no property damage, no one harmed, not condoning DUI, but yet the government, the federal government, contends he has lost his Second Amendment rights for the remainder of his life. We won at the district court, and the U.S. government has appealed up, and there's been delay after delay. And in fact, we just, after having filed all of our briefing, filed supplemental briefing, having oral argument, we just, the past week, get an order from the Third Circuit that it's now going to consider the case what they call en banc, meaning in front of the entire court. And now it's new briefing, new oral argument, and God only knows how long it'll be until we get a decision there.
What is the legal precedent that they would base that decision upon?
So
is there any?
Well, their contention is a statutory provision. So 18 U.S.C. 922 G1 says basically if you are convicted of any crime punishable, not punished, punishable by more than 1 year in jail, you are prohibited from being able to purchase, possess, utilize firearms and ammunition. The definition section in 921 then goes on to define what constitutes a crime punishable by more than 1 year and excludes out any state law offense of a misdemeanor nature that could be punished by 2 years or less. So what that means is basically in relation to state law misdemeanors, they must be able to be punished by more than 2 years to be able to trigger that federal disability. Here in Pennsylvania, the only misdemeanors, and excluding domestic violence convictions of this analysis, that would trigger that prohibition is a misdemeanor of the first degree, because they can be punished by up to 5 years in jail. But what's so interesting is you don't, in most of these instances where someone gets a misdemeanor of the first degree, if they spend even a month or two on probation, that's a lot. They generally don't see jail time. They don't see anything. But because the statute would allow for them to be punished by up to 5 years, that's where we run afoul of the federal law, where it triggers that prohibition. So it's really mind-boggling to me that, for a non-violent misdemeanor, we are going to prohibit people. So I have a number of other challenges of that nature. I mean, I've won a number of these cases in the past. In fact, I had a client who back in the day, you could get a PennDOT window tint exemption so that you could have window tint. They have since done away with that allowance, but back in the day you could. And he went through the process, had that exemption, buys a new car, remembers all the hassles he went through having to get that exemption, makes a dumb decision, decides to basically remove the VIN from the certificate and put his new VIN in. And of course, he gets pulled over. Law enforcement figures out when they run the exemption that it's not matching the VINs. And so he ends up pleading out to it, says, yeah, I did it. But that was a misdemeanor of the first degree. Well, that federally prohibited him. And the Eastern District of Pennsylvania Federal District Courts said, yeah, this is not something you can deny this person for the remainder of his life for. So we were successful in that. But there are a lot of those types of cases pending, a lot of restrictions on travel. I was also successful a number of months back in getting the Middle District of Pennsylvania to rule that the carry of a loaded handgun in a vehicle, the prohibition on that was unconstitutional. Unfortunately, that was stayed pending appeal. That case is now before the Third Circuit, awaiting the Third Circuit decision. But there are so many provisions in our laws that are clearly, based on the U.S. Supreme Court's precedent, unconstitutional, and yet the government continues to enforce them. I know that a lot of the different courts of common pleas are kind of in a holding pattern, I'd say, because they know these cases are out there. They have a lot of people being charged criminally. I heard that in Monroe County, they're actually taking defendants who are all in a similar situation, charged under these types of statutes, for example, violation of our transportation laws in relation to firearms, and grouping them together for disposition in the future based on whatever the precedent comes down to be. But of course, here in Pennsylvania, we have speedy trial rights. So the courts, in some regards, are going to have to decide these cases, in the near future, and won't have the benefit of the Third Circuit or federal courts weighing in beyond what we already have as precedent. So it's just really disconcerting to me that we're at this age where it seems like it's acceptable for the government to violate our rights and even statutory rights and not be held accountable.
And the issue that you brought up earlier, even if that is challenged, who's paying for it? On the other side, we are, because the defense will be our money. And this is where we get into the conundrum that we're in. There are so many, as you said earlier, so many regulations, laws that we're totally unaware of, many of us. And this applies, to our profession in the medical world. I mean, there are so many things relative to insurance laws, et cetera, that we have to be at least aware of. And then you touched also on frivolous litigation. I mean, anybody can sue anyone, and that's what keeps all you guys in business. I know that. But, but that's part of the frustration. If there were some restriction on, the realities of suits and what can be brought to the court, that would kind of minimize perhaps the duration or the length of litigation, or at least decisions on litigation, as you alluded to earlier as well. I mean, it's ridiculous if you have to wait 10 years to get a ruling on something. That's insane. And during that time frame, oftentimes there are increased legal expenses and things because there are challenges. And so, I know I always say the medical system is broke. Well, the legal system is broken as well. And one way we can kind of mitigate that is at the ballot box. And we just saw what happened with that with our Supreme Court ruling that we just had relative to the vote on retention. I think in our next guest that we'll be posting, I'm going to talk a great deal about why. Why did some of the things that just happen? But you've been engaged and involved in that world too, I know, Josh. And, we take a shellacking sometimes, but we have to keep coming back. So, relative to that in your world, I guess an important question that I always want to see with everything that we do here at STN is how people can become involved in a meaningful way. What can they do, Josh, to kind of challenge or assist in challenging some of the things that you brought to us today?
So that's a great question, because I actually wanted to talk a minute at least about what you just said about the ballot box and that, and this is the perfect way or segue into that. Become involved. Learn who's going to be on the ballot in advance. We have one of the best opportunities here in the Commonwealth whereby our judges are not appointed. There is a limited circumstance where there's a vacancy where the governor, with the consent of the Senate, can appoint for a very limited period of time until the next municipal election, which is going to be our off-year election, so every odd year. But other than that, we elect our judges, and we elect them for a 10-year term, and then every 10 years they come up for a retention vote, which is a simple yes, no, do we want to retain them? But people aren't involved. They don't know anything about the judges. They'll say, oh, the information isn't out there. I may have accepted that back in the 90s, before Al Gore invented the internet. But today, that's not. You can go on Google and just simply type in who are the judge candidates in Berks County or Montgomery County, statewide, and you'll have that information. People just don't want to be bothered with it. And yet, this is a situation where the judiciary is supposed to be our last line of defense. And yet what we're seeing is the politicization of the judiciary. It's becoming so political. You're not seeing decisions where judges are merely saying, here's what the law is. I'm required to uphold it. No, instead, you see a judge where the black letter of the law says the outcome should be X, and the judge saying, I don't necessarily agree with that. So, you know what? If you don't like what I decide, you can take an appeal. Try explaining to your client why they should continue to have to pay you to take an appeal when the law said they should have won from the beginning. That's everything that's wrong with our system. And why it's wrong is because people aren't getting involved. We saw back in 2015 when the 3 justices were initially elected to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court that they made promises during their campaigns, things that, in my opinion, are directly contrary to the Judicial Conduct Code as well as the Attorney Ethics Code, saying basically what they would do if they were elected. And one of their promises was, we're going to strike down this redistricting map. And what is one of the first things they did? They struck down that redistricting map. And it's a really disconcerting because not only did they strike it down, but Pennsylvania's Constitution is explicitly clear that it is only the General Assembly that can draft and enact a map. But what our Pennsylvania Supreme Court decided to do? Draft its own map and institute it. And that is everything that's wrong with the system. But voters don't want to be engaged. And unfortunately, I have a great friend who made the best statement to me, I think it was 2 days ago. He said, Josh, Republicans come out only when there's a calamity. Democrats come out whenever there's a boogeyman. Trump's the boogeyman. So that's why we saw the turnout that we did.
Yeah.
And there's absolutely no reason for it. But unfortunately, Republicans think that just because there's a strong leadership in the White House, that somehow, some way, they don't have to turn out for these local elections. And quite honestly, I would put forth to you that our municipal elections, again, those are the off year, the odd number year elections, are the most important. That is every time we are electing a judge. No judge can be up for election or retention during an even number year. And the voters just don't seem to care.
Yeah.
So I would strongly recommend, one of the things, get engaged in voting, get out the word, join your local Republican GOP, make a change there. We could spend an hour talking about all the problems within the number of the local GOPs, let alone the state GOP, which is
we'll do that in the future, Josh.
Absolute cluster. But seriously, get involved. And learn about the candidates. I just, I follow what I preach. I was just 2 nights ago elected as chair of the East Region of the Berks County GOP, trying to make change and to ensure that we start winning elections again. Especially think about school board and judges of election. These are really important positions that, can be won on $500 or $1,000. But a lot of times the candidates don't have that type of money. So, being able to donate to groups that will use the money appropriately is also important. If your firearm rights are important to you, I would strongly recommend joining Firearm Owners Against Crime. Phenomenal organization, grassroots organization, boots on the ground in Harrisburg when any of these bills come up. In fact, was just in Harrisburg the other day. They were testifying about the bill I mentioned earlier that would allow for attorney's fees and costs in relation to preemption. At the state level, at the federal level, I would say Second Amendment Foundation is one to join and support. NRA historically, at one point was the entity, unfortunately has fallen off, but I have to say Bill Bockenberg recently became the president there, making monumental positive changes in the NRA. Really looking forward to what all he's going to do with it. So I know a lot of people were put off by NRA in the past decade and left. I would strongly recommend you look at what they're doing today, see those changes, those positive changes. But it's really about being involved in the organizations that you can trust will defend your rights. Because at the end of the day, most people can't afford this type of litigation. And even for those major organizations, if they don't have donations funding in that, they also can't. And like we discussed before, government has unlimited resources at its disposal. And my always concern is for all the organizations I represent is it becomes a death by 1,000 cuts. If you have to keep litigating the same issue, it's just a different form of local government that's violating your constitutional or statutory rights. there's limited amounts in the coffers. So really, reaching out to your elected officials, letting them know what you think about this, that you expect them to deal with it. I mean, just as another example, the Pennsylvania State Police released some of their statistics for last year, and the number of people they denied versus the number of those that were successful in challenging that the denial was erroneous, over 50%. Think about that for a minute. 50% of the people the Pennsylvania State Police denied were denied their Second Amendment rights erroneously. And there's no ability to get anything in return because they're the government, so they have immunity, generally speaking. So, even if you have to bring a court action to vindicate your rights, you can't get it back. That's something that the General Assembly should be addressing. There is no ability here in the Commonwealth, if you don't know whether the Pennsylvania State Police contends that you are prohibited, to just simply say, hey, Pennsylvania State Police, tell me what your position is. Am I a prohibited person or not? To me, that's something that should get bipartisan support. Why would anyone be opposed to providing a mechanism by which someone can simply say, hey, Pennsylvania State Police, what's your position in relation to me? And oh yeah, by the way, if you say I'm prohibited, there has to be a challenge provision whereby you can challenge that, because I go back to what I just said, their error rate's over 50%. So, there are things like that I really hope listeners will get involved in. It's probably more than what you were looking for as a response. But, once you give a lawyer a microphone, all bets are off.
Well, we've had you speak before, Josh. I knew what I was going to anticipate this morning, and it's been great. No, you've given a lot of information. I really should have told everyone to have their notebook and pencil handy, because there was a lot of great information that Josh passed along. A couple of things points that Josh just made, really. It all starts local, not to sound cliche, but it's true. You have to get involved. You have to meet your local legislators. They're there. They're there to speak with you and hear what you have to say. And you can set up a meeting with your local state rep, state senator, and go in and talk to them. Learn who they are, how they stand, challenge them on different things, and become engaged and involved. I think that everything that occurs, and to your most recent point there, Josh, there has to be recourse. We have to have some way that we can mitigate situations where you're eliminated from being able to do something, yet you have no recourse in trying to find out even why. So there are so many things that we need to fight against, so many things that we need to be aware of, and it all starts by just getting involved. So to that point, Josh has given us some ways we can get involved, some of the organizations and things that we can do. But Josh, I know you also have a blog and you have other information as to how people can get in contact with you. Why don't you give us some idea how they can do that?
Sure. So the blog is blog.princelaw.com. That's blog.princelaw.com. Also our website, www.princelaw.com. Have a lot of information there. As well as we have a separate website of firearmsindustryconsultinggroup.com, where we also have a lot of information. But probably for your listeners, the blog is going to have the most information with different cases we've litigated, what the outcomes are, all sorts of information, even including information about this past week being able to carry a firearm while voting here in Pennsylvania. So we have a lot of information out there, really a good resource for people. Also, you can obviously call us. Phone number is 888-313-0416. Again, that's 888-313-0416. You can email me at joshua@princelaw.com. All the information's on the website, princelaw.com. So, if you do have an issue, feel free to reach out, and happy to discuss whatever the issue is with you.
And we'll get all that information out for you too, Josh. And listen, I want to commend you. I really do, on being tenacious relative to some of your political aspirations. Don't give up, my friend. I know it's been a challenge. It's been a tough road, but it always is. We look at Abraham Lincoln and what he went through, and he didn't give up.
Let me just throw something out here, and maybe the next session you'll chat a little bit more about this, but I found it was really interesting that the PA GOP this election cycle dropped over $400,000 into my opponent's campaign in the primary to support him. You know what they didn't do? Not a single mailer, not a single anything to support him in the general. Now, think about that for a minute.
Well, we have to be an alternative to that, Josh, and that's what it comes down to. It's a grassroots effort, and, we really need to get people engaged, involved. I wanted to let everybody know in advance, and this is still in the preliminary stages, but we're going to be putting together a program. I've been in contact with a number of different speakers. We're going to call it Exposing Islam and give you an idea of what's happening around the globe, but here in our country right now. So we're looking forward to bringing you that and that information as well. Josh, take care of yourself. Keep up the fight, my friend, and thank you. We'll have you back to talk about some of these other issues. And everybody, get a hold of Josh if you do have an issue on the Second Amendment or any kind of conflict you're experiencing. Some of them are things that you may not even be aware of and not have the knowledge of, but you have just broken a law or been challenged on it. So let's always be there to fight, and we have to be willing to stand up because, as Josh said, that scale, legal scale, is supposed to be level, and when it's skewed due to politics, that's where we get into trouble, and we are there now. So you guys take care. Josh, safe travels. Good luck with that baby, and tell your lovely wife I said hi, and we will see you soon, my friend.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.